That's what my boss said to me. Not in private. Not with the door closed. Right there in the glass-walled conference room on the 7th floor where everyone could see my face turn red, my hands start shaking, my entire year of hope crumble in front of 20 curious eyes pretending not to watch. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I had just finished my annual performance review. Sat there for 45 minutes while Diane Garrett, Vice President of Operations at Summit Ridge Financial, scrolled through her laptop with the enthusiasm of someone reading a grocery list. She clicked through slides showing my numbers. My client retention rate, 97%, the highest on the team. My project completions, all under budget, all ahead of schedule. The Carson merger I'd saved single-handedly when their initial analyst quit mid-process. And then I said it. The sentence I'd been rehearsing in my head for weeks. I'm really excited about discussing my raise. I know I've exceeded every target this year, and I'm ready to take on more responsibility. Diane looked up from her screen. And she laughed. Not a polite chuckle. A full, dismissive laugh that made my stomach drop. What raise? She repeated, tilting her head like I'd just asked her to fly me to the moon. Camilla, you're lucky you still have a job here. Do you know how many people would kill to have your position? You should be grateful, not greedy. I sat there frozen. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. Because what do you say to that? When you've worked 70-hour weeks, skipped vacations, answered emails at midnight, mentored 3 junior analysts who all got promoted before you, and this is what you get? She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her blazer sleeve. Besides, we just gave Trevor the senior analyst promotion. You know how budgets work. We can't give raises to everyone. Trevor Langston. The guy who started 6 months after me. The guy who forgot to file the Pemberton acquisition documents and I had to redo them over a weekend. The guy who took credit for my market analysis during the quarterly presentation while I was out sick with the flu. He got promoted. I got told to be grateful. I see, I said quietly, my voice barely steady. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just nodded, grabbed my folder, and walked out of that glass box with my head high and my heart in pieces. That was on a Thursday in March. By Friday afternoon, I'd made a decision. My name is Camilla Rose Donovan. I'm 32 years old. I have a degree in finance from Riverside State University, a flawless work record, and absolutely nothing left to lose. And if you think this story ends with me sitting quietly in my cubicle, waiting for scraps from people who never saw my worth, then you don't know what happens when someone who's been invisible finally decides to be seen. I didn't quit that day. I didn't storm into Diane's office with a resignation letter. I didn't even update my LinkedIn profile. Instead, I went home to my cramped one-bedroom apartment in the Maple Gardens complex, the one with the leaky faucet I couldn't afford to fix because I was lucky to have a job. I sat on my thrift store couch, opened my laptop, and started researching. For 2 years, I had been working on something quietly. Something Diane didn't know about. Something Trevor definitely didn't know about, because Trevor didn't know anything unless it was handed to him on a silver platter with step-by-step instructions. I had been building a client consultation business on the side. Small at first. Just weekends, just a few referrals from old college friends who needed financial planning advice. I charged almost nothing. $50 an hour. $100 for complex portfolio reviews. Mostly, I did it because I loved the work. The kind of work where people actually listened to me. Where my ideas weren't stolen. Where my name was on the invoice. But after that performance review, after Diane's laugh echoed in my head all weekend, I made a choice. I wasn't going to build this business on the side anymore. I was going to build it into something that would make Summit Ridge Financial look like a lemonade stand. I didn't tell anyone at work. Not my desk neighbor, Fiona, who I'd eaten lunch with for 3 years. Not my college roommate who worked in HR. Not even my mother, who would have worried herself sick and told me to just be patient, honey, your time will come. Because I'd been patient. I'd been patient for 4 years. And patience had gotten me exactly nowhere. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. So I started working. Late nights after my 9 to 5. Early mornings before anyone else logged on. Weekends that used to be for brunch and Netflix became weekends for certifications, networking events, building a website, drafting proposals. I took on 3 clients in April. 7 in May. By June, I was making as much from my side business as I was from my salary at Summit Ridge. And by July, I had a decision to make. But I didn't make it yet. Because I wanted to be sure. I wanted to be so sure that when I finally walked away, there would be no doubt, no second guessing, no crawling back. I kept showing up to work. Kept hitting my targets. Kept watching Trevor fumble through presentations while Diane nodded approvingly. Kept sitting in meetings where my ideas were ignored until a man repeated them 5 minutes later and suddenly they were brilliant. And the whole time, I was building. Brick by brick. Client by client. Dollar by dollar. 3 months after that performance review, I had 22 active clients. 6 months later, I had 41. And by the time my next annual review rolled around, exactly 1 year after Diane told me I was lucky to have a job, I had something she didn't see coming. I had a choice. And this time, I was the one holding all the power. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because before I could walk away, before I could build something unstoppable, I had to sit through 1 more year of being invisible. 1 more year of watching mediocrity get rewarded while excellence got overlooked. And let me tell you, that year taught me something more valuable than any degree or certification ever could. It taught me that the people who underestimate you aren't your enemies. They're your fuel. Every dismissive comment, every stolen idea, every condescending smile, I collected them all like receipts. And when the time came, I didn't need revenge. I just needed to show them what happens when the person they overlooked stops asking for permission and starts building her own empire. Because they were right about one thing, I was lucky. Just not in the way they thought. I was lucky they underestimated me. Lucky they pushed me out before I wasted another year of my life in a place that would never see me. Lucky they gave me the anger I needed to bet on myself when playing it safe would have kept me small forever. That performance review wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of theirs ending. And mine rising. My name is Camilla Rose Donovan. I'm 32 years old. And if you think you know how this ends, with me crying in my car, sending out desperate job applications, or settling for another soul-crushing corporate job, then you haven't been paying attention. Because the woman who walked out of that glass conference room a year ago? She's not the same woman telling you this story today. Let me take you back to where we are now. It's March again. Exactly 12 months since Diane Garrett told me I was lucky to have a job. Exactly 52 weeks since I sat in that performance review and realized that no matter how hard I worked, no matter how many clients I retained, no matter how many projects I saved, it would never be enough for people who had already decided I was invisible. But here's what Diane doesn't know. Here's what Trevor Langston, with his unearned promotion and borrowed ideas, definitely doesn't know. I've spent the last year building something they can't see. Something they can't touch. Something they certainly can't take credit for. While they were deciding I wasn't worth a 3% raise, I was building a business that grew 300%. While Trevor was stumbling through presentations using my research, I was presenting to clients who actually valued my expertise. While Diane was laughing at my request for recognition, I was being recognized by people who paid me what I was actually worth. 12 months. That's all it took. 12 months of waking up at 5 in the morning to answer client emails before logging into Summit Ridge at 8. 12 months of working through lunch breaks to build financial models for my own clients while pretending to care about Summit Ridge's quarterly reports. 12 months of smiling politely while being passed over, talked over, and looked over. But I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was planning. See, the thing about being underestimated is that people stop watching you. They stop seeing you as a threat. Diane thought I'd taken her words to heart. Thought I'd shrunk back into my cubicle, grateful and obedient. She had no idea that every dismissive comment she made was another brick in the foundation I was building outside her view. By the time January rolled around, I had 53 active clients in my independent practice. 53 people who found me through referrals, through my website, through word of mouth in professional circles that Summit Ridge didn't even know existed. I had registered my business officially, Donovan Financial Strategies, LLC. I had a business bank account. I had liability insurance. I had a virtual assistant handling my scheduling. And I had something else. Something that made my hands shake every time I thought about it. I had enough money saved to quit. Not just quit and panic. Quit and thrive. My side business was bringing in more per month than my salary at Summit Ridge. And unlike my salary, it was growing. Every single month, new clients. Every single week, referrals. Every single day, proof that I was worth more than Diane would ever be willing to pay. But I didn't quit. Not yet. Because timing matters. And I wanted the timing to be perfect. You see, Summit Ridge Financial holds annual reviews in March. The same month they denied me a raise last year. The same month they promoted Trevor over me. And this year, I had something special planned. My second annual performance review was scheduled for March 14th. A Tuesday. 2 weeks from today. And I've been preparing for it like an athlete prepares for the Olympics. I've documented everything. Every project I've completed. Every client I've retained. Every mistake I've fixed that someone else made. Every goal I've exceeded. I have spreadsheets, emails, client testimonials, metrics that prove beyond any doubt that I am not just good at my job, I'm the best person in that department. Not because I need Diane to finally see it. But because I want her to see exactly what she's about to lose. I've already drafted my resignation letter. It's sitting in my documents folder, labeled freedom.docs. 2 paragraphs. Professional. Polite. Devastating in its simplicity. I've already lined up 3 major clients who are leaving Summit Ridge to work with me exclusively. They don't know it yet, but they've told me privately they're unhappy with the service they've been getting. One of them specifically mentioned how much better things were when I was handling their account before Trevor took over. I've already built a network of 5 other financial analysts who left corporate firms to start their own practices. We meet monthly. Share strategies. Refer overflow clients to each other. They're my real colleagues now. The ones who see my work. Who celebrate my wins. Who don't laugh when I talk about my worth. Everything is ready. The business is stable. The clients are waiting. The future is built. I just have to make it through 2 more weeks of pretending I still need Summit Ridge Financial. 2 more weeks of sitting in my gray cubicle under fluorescent lights that hum too loud. 2 more weeks of watching Trevor get praised for mediocrity while I'm expected to be grateful for employment. 2 more weeks of Diane walking past my desk without even glancing my direction because why would she? I'm furniture to her. A line item in her budget that she got to keep flat while patting herself on the back for fiscal responsibility. But here's the thing about furniture. You don't notice it until it's gone. And in 2 weeks, when I walk into that performance review with my documentation, my professionalism, and my resignation letter, Diane Garrett is going to learn a very expensive lesson. You can't laugh at someone's worth and expect them to stick around to prove it to you. I think about that moment constantly. The look on her face when I slide that letter across the table. When I stand up, shake her hand, and walk out of Summit Ridge Financial for the last time. When she realizes that the person she dismissed so easily was the person holding half her department together. I've played it out in my head 100 times. What I'll say. What I won't say. How I'll keep my voice steady and my face calm even though my heart will be racing. But more than that moment, I think about what comes after. Because this isn't just about quitting a job that never valued me. This is about proving to myself that I was right. That I am worth more. That I didn't need their permission to build something extraordinary. For too long, I measured my success by their standards. By whether Diane smiled at me in meetings. By whether my name appeared on the quarterly achievement list. By whether I got a cost of living raise or a real one. But now? Now I measure success differently. I measure it by clients who trust me with their life savings. By referrals from people who believe in my expertise. By income that grows because I'm good at what I do, not because someone decided I earned a 2% bump. I measure it by waking up excited to work instead of dreading the commute. By having control over my schedule, my clients, my future. I measure it by freedom. And in 2 weeks, I'm walking straight into it. My name is Camilla Rose Donovan. I'm 32 years old. I have a business that's thriving, a plan that's flawless, and a performance review that's going to change everything. They think this meeting is about reviewing my performance. They have no idea it's about me reviewing theirs. And finding them wanting. Stay tuned. Because the best part? It hasn't even happened yet. The morning after I mentally committed to my exit plan, I woke up at 4:47 a.m. Not because of an alarm. Because my brain wouldn't shut off. It kept running numbers, timelines, scenarios. The responsible part of me, the part that had been trained by years of corporate conditioning, whispered doubts in the dark. What if the clients don't stay? What if this is just beginner's luck? What if you're making a massive mistake? But then I remembered Diane's laugh. Trevor's promotion. 4 years of being overlooked. And I got out of bed. I made coffee in the tiny kitchen of my Maple Gardens apartment, opened my laptop at the scratched dining table I'd bought secondhand, and got to work. Because quitting dramatically in 2 weeks was satisfying to imagine, but building something that would last? That required more than anger. It required strategy. For the next 14 days, I lived a double life so carefully constructed that even I sometimes forgot which version of myself was real. At Summit Ridge Financial, I was Camilla the Reliable. The one who showed up on time, completed her assignments, sat quietly in meetings, and never caused problems. I responded to Diane's emails within 10 minutes. I helped Trevor when he inevitably screwed up his client reports, which he did weekly. I even volunteered to organize the office birthday celebration for someone I barely knew, because that's what invisible people do. They make themselves useful in ways that don't threaten anyone. But the moment I left that building at 5:30 p.m., I became someone else entirely. I drive home in my 7-year-old Honda Civic, the one with the check engine light that had been on for 6 months because I couldn't afford repairs on a salary that hadn't increased since 2022. I'd change out of my corporate uniform, those boring blazers and bland blouses that Diane once told me were appropriately professional, and I'd put on something comfortable. Then I'd open my laptop again, and I'd step into the life I was building in secret. Evenings were for client calls. I'd schedule them from 6 to 9, back to back sometimes. A young couple in Riverside Heights trying to buy their first home and terrified of mortgage rates. A woman in her 50s who just inherited money from her father and had no idea how to invest it. A small business owner who needed help restructuring his retirement accounts. These people didn't care that I worked from a 1-bedroom apartment with a leaky faucet. They cared that I listened. That I explained things clearly without talking down to them. That I answered their questions at 8 p.m. on a Wednesday without making them feel like they were bothering me. And they paid me. Not $50 an hour anymore. I'd raised my rates in January to $150 for basic consultations, $300 for comprehensive financial planning. And people paid it without hesitation because they could see the value. Every payment that hit my business account felt like proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that Diane was wrong. Proof that I had been underpriced, undervalued, and underpaid for years by people who benefited from my lack of confidence. Weekends were for building systems. I spent Saturdays working on my website, making it more professional, adding client testimonials with permission, creating downloadable resources that would attract leads. I took an online course in digital marketing. Another one in advanced tax strategies. I got certified in estate planning. Every skill I added was another brick in the foundation, another service I could offer, another reason for clients to choose me over a big firm like Summit Ridge. Sundays were for networking. I joined 3 professional organizations for independent financial advisors. I showed up to virtual meetups, asked questions, offered advice when I had it. I connected with other people who'd left corporate finance to start their own practices. One of them, a woman named Jolene Chen from Crescent Bay, told me something I'll never forget. We were on a Zoom call with 4 other independent advisors, talking about client acquisition strategies, when she said, "The hardest part isn't getting clients. It's believing you deserve to have them." I felt that sentence in my chest. Because she was right. Even with 53 clients, even with income that exceeded my salary, even with 5-star reviews and referrals pouring in, part of me still heard Diane's voice. "You're lucky to have a job. You should be grateful, not greedy." So I did something I'd never done before. I printed out my client list. All 53 names. I printed out my revenue reports for the past 6 months. I printed out testimonials. I put them in a folder and I labeled it evidence. Not evidence for Diane. Evidence for myself. Because the corporate world had spent 4 years teaching me to doubt my value. And I needed physical proof to override that programming. Every time the fear crept in, every time I wondered if I was insane for planning to quit a stable job, I'd open that folder. I'd read the thank you email from the couple who bought their house because of my advice. I'd look at the revenue graph going up and to the right, month after month. I'd remind myself that this wasn't luck. This was skill. This was work. This was worth. The double life took a toll. I was exhausted. Some nights I worked until midnight, then had to be at Summit Ridge by 8 the next morning. I stopped seeing friends because I didn't have time. My sister called me 3 times before I finally called her back, and when she asked if I was okay, I lied and said I was fine, just busy. I lived on coffee and takeout because I didn't have time to cook. My apartment was a mess. Laundry piled up. I stopped going to the gym. Dark circles appeared under my eyes that concealer couldn't quite hide. Fiona, my desk neighbor at Summit Ridge, noticed. "You look tired," she said one Thursday afternoon, concern in her voice. "Are you feeling okay?" "Just busy," I told her with a smile. "You know how it is." She didn't know. Nobody knew. Because I couldn't tell anyone. Not until it was done. Not until I'd walked out of that building for the last time. There were moments I almost broke. Moments the exhaustion felt like too much. Like the night I stayed up until 2 a.m. finishing a comprehensive financial plan for a new client, then had to present Trevor's project to a client at Summit Ridge the next morning because he'd called in sick with a hangover. I stood in that conference room, running on 4 hours of sleep, presenting work that he'd take credit for, and I felt the anger rise up hot and sharp in my throat. But I swallowed it. Smiled. Finished the presentation. And that night, I signed 2 new clients. Because that's what this time period taught me. It taught me that you can be furious and functional at the same time. That you can smile at people who disrespect you while building the escape route they'll never see coming. That sometimes survival looks like playing the game while secretly changing the rules. I kept a calendar counting down to March 14th. Every morning I'd cross off another day. 13 days left. 12 days left. 11. During those 2 weeks, I also did something else. I started documenting everything at Summit Ridge. Every project I completed, I saved copies to my personal drive, nothing confidential, nothing that belonged to the company, just evidence of my work. Performance metrics. Client satisfaction scores. Email threads where clients specifically requested to work with me instead of other analysts. I wasn't planning to use it against them. I was planning to use it for me. Because when you've been told you're not good enough for long enough, you need evidence to believe otherwise. You need receipts. I also quietly started transitioning my Summit Ridge clients to other analysts. Not Trevor, God no. But there were two competent people in the department, Sarah and Ramon, who actually knew what they were doing. I started looping them into emails, mentioning them in client calls, setting up meetings where they could build rapport. Some people might call that professional courtesy. I called it making sure my clients wouldn't suffer when I left. Because unlike Diane and Trevor, I actually cared about the people whose money I managed. 1 week before my performance review, I got an email from Diane. Subject line, Annual Review Prep. The message was brief. Hi Camilla, please prepare a summary of your achievements this year for our discussion next Tuesday. Keep it to 1 page. Thanks, Diane. 1 page. For an entire year of work. For 97% client retention. For 3 major projects I'd saved from disaster. For countless hours of unpaid overtime. 1 page. I stared at that email for a full minute. Then I laughed. Actually laughed out loud in my cubicle, which made Fiona look over with concern. Because Diane had no idea what I was about to hand her. I did prepare a 1-page summary. It was professional, thorough, and undeniable. But I also prepared something else. A 2-paragraph resignation letter that I'd rewritten 17 times until it was perfect. Not angry. Not emotional. Just clear. I printed both documents on good paper. Put them in a folder. Set the folder by my front door so I wouldn't forget it. 5 days left. 4 days. 3. The night before my performance review, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through scenarios. What Diane might say. How I'd respond. Whether she'd be surprised. Whether she'd try to convince me to stay. Whether I'd feel relieved or terrified when I finally said the words out loud. I thought about my business. 53 clients who trusted me. A revenue stream that had never decreased, only grown. A professional network that had my back. A future I'd built entirely on my own terms. And I thought about Summit Ridge. For years of my life. For years of being told I wasn't quite enough. For years of watching less qualified people get promoted while I got told to be grateful. At 3 a.m., I gave up on sleeping. I got up, made tea, and opened my laptop one more time. I looked at my business dashboard. At the numbers that proved Diane wrong. At the life I'd built in the margins of a job that never saw me coming. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, I'd stop being 2 people and finally become 1. Tomorrow, Camilla the invisible would disappear forever. And Camilla the free would finally step into the light. March 14th arrived like any other Tuesday, except it wasn't. The sky was gray, threatening rain. I woke up at 6 a.m. sharp, no alarm needed, adrenaline doing the job instead. My hands shook while I made coffee. I burned my toast because I wasn't paying attention. I changed outfits 3 times before settling on a navy blazer and white blouse, the kind of outfit that said, professional, but also, I don't need your approval anymore. The folder sat on my passenger seat during the entire drive to Summit Ridge Financial. Red light at the intersection of Pine and Colchester Boulevard, I glanced at it. My 1-page achievement summary on top. My resignation letter underneath. 2 pieces of paper that would change everything. I parked in my usual spot, 3rd row from the building, because senior staff got the close spots and I'd never been senior staff despite doing senior level work. I sat in my car for 5 extra minutes, breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth, the way that meditation app I'd downloaded kept telling me to do. At 7:53 a.m., I walked through the glass doors of Summit Ridge Financial for what I knew would be one of the last times. The lobby smelled like it always did, expensive cologne and air conditioning and ambition. The receptionist, Kelly, smiled at me the way she smiled at everyone, polite and impersonal. Morning, Camilla. Morning. I took the elevator to the 7th floor. Stepped out into the open-plan office with its rows of gray cubicles and its glass conference rooms and its motivational posters about teamwork and excellence that had stopped meaning anything years ago. Fiona was already at her desk, coffee in hand, squinting at her monitor. "Big day," she said without looking up. "Performance review, right?" "Right. Good luck." "I'm sure you'll do great." I didn't respond. Just walked to my cubicle, set down my bag, powered on my computer. I had 2 hours before my meeting with Diane. 2 hours to pretend everything was normal. 2 hours to sit in this gray box and answer emails and format spreadsheets and exist in a world that was about to become my past. At 9:47 a.m., my phone buzzed. A calendar reminder, annual performance review, conference room C, 10 a.m. 13 minutes. I picked up my folder. Checked my reflection in the dark screen of my monitor. I looked calm. Professional. Put together. Nobody looking at me would know that my heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. At 9:58, I walked to conference room C. The same glass-walled room where Diane had laughed at me exactly 1 year ago. The same table. The same chairs. The same view of the parking lot where I'd sat in my car crying after that meeting, feeling worthless and small. But I wasn't the same person. Diane was already inside, laptop open, phone face down on the table, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She looked up when I entered. "Camilla. Right on time. Close the door and have a seat." I closed the door. I sat down. I placed my folder on the table in front of me, both hands resting on top of it like I was protecting something valuable. Because I was. "So," Diane began, her tone businesslike and bored, "another year. Let's see how you've done." She clicked through her laptop screen, the same disinterested scrolling as last year. Numbers. Metrics. Performance indicators that reduced 12 months of my life into data points she barely glanced at. "Client retention looks good," she said. 96%. "That's solid." 97, I corrected quietly. She looked up, surprised I'd spoken. "Sorry?" 97%. I retained 97% of my clients this year. The highest rate in the department. A flicker of something crossed her face. Annoyance maybe. Right. 97. Anyway, project completions are on track. You've met expectations across the board. Met expectations. 4 years of exceeding every target, and I'd met expectations. I actually exceeded targets in every category, I said, voice steady. I have documentation if you'd like to review it. I opened my folder and slid the one-page summary across the table. She glanced at it like I'd handed her a menu at a restaurant she wasn't planning to eat at. "I'm sure you did fine," Diane said. "Look, Camilla, you're a solid performer. Reliable. You do your work, you don't cause problems. That's valuable. Solid. Reliable. The words people use when they mean forgettable." "But," she continued, and I knew that, but was coming, could see it forming before she even spoke, "we're still in a tight budget year. The economy is unpredictable. We're being conservative with compensation adjustments." Conservative. The word corporate people use when they mean no. "So while we appreciate your contributions," Diane said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "we're going to hold your salary at the current level for this review period. We'll revisit it next year." Next year. The same thing she'd said last year. The same promise that never materialized. I sat very still. Waited for the anger to come. The hurt. The same crushing disappointment I'd felt 12 months ago when this exact conversation had broken something inside me. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt something else. Something clear and cold and powerful. Relief. Because this, right here, was the confirmation I needed. The proof that nothing had changed. That nothing would ever change. That I'd made the right decision. I see, I said calmly. Diane looked pleased with my response. Pleased that I wasn't arguing. That I was being reasonable. I knew you'd understand, she said. You're a team player, Camilla. That's what makes you valuable here. Valuable enough to keep. Not valuable enough to pay fairly. Actually, I said, and my voice was steady, stronger than I'd expected, I have something for you. I reached into my folder and pulled out the second document. 2 paragraphs on crisp white paper. I slid it across the table, right next to my performance summary. Diane looked down at it. Her eyes scanned the first line. I watched her face change. The professional smile disappeared. Her eyebrows pulled together. She read it once, then read it again, like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. This is a resignation letter, she said slowly. Yes. You're quitting? I'm giving you 2 weeks' notice, effective today. My last day will be March 28th. Diane stared at me like I'd just spoken a foreign language. I don't understand. We just discussed your performance. You're doing well here. I am doing well, I agreed. Just not here. Camilla, if this is about the salary review, we can discuss. It's not about the salary review, I interrupted, and it felt strange and powerful to interrupt Diane Garrett, to speak over her, to take up space in a conversation instead of shrinking. It's about the fact that this is the 2nd year you've told me I'm not worth investing in. And I've decided to believe you. Her mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. That's not what I said. You said the budget is tight. That you're being conservative. That I'm valuable but not valuable enough for a raise. You said the exact same thing last year. And the year before that. Every company has budget constraints. You promoted Trevor 6 months ago, I said. You gave him a 20% salary increase and a new title. You've hired 2 new analysts since I started. But somehow there's never budget for me. Diane's face flushed. Trevor's situation was different. He was being recruited by other firms. We had to remain competitive. And you assumed I wasn't. Silence. She had assumed. Assumed I'd stay because I always stayed. Assumed I had nowhere else to go because I'd never left. Assumed my loyalty was guaranteed because I'd never demanded anything. Where are you going? Diane asked finally, and I heard something in her voice I'd never heard before. Uncertainty. I've started my own financial planning practice. Donovan Financial Strategies. I've been building it for the past year. Her eyes widened. You've been working for a competitor while employed here? I've been working for myself, on my own time, with my own clients. Nothing I've done violates my employment agreement. I checked. And I had checked. Thoroughly. With an actual employment attorney I'd paid $200 to review my contract. Because I wasn't going to give them any ammunition. Diane leaned back in her chair, studying me like she was seeing me for the first time. How many clients? 53 active clients. Growing every month. 53. She repeated it like she couldn't believe it. How did you even have time? Nights. Weekends. The time I used to spend hoping you'd notice my work. That landed. I saw it in the way her jaw tightened. Camilla, let's not be hasty here. If you're feeling undervalued, we can revisit the compensation discussion. I'm sure we can find some flexibility in the budget. No. The word came out firm. Final. No. I don't want you to find flexibility. I don't want you to suddenly discover budget that wasn't there 5 minutes ago. I don't want a counteroffer that proves you could have paid me fairly all along but chose not to until I forced your hand. Diane's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. Starting your own practice is risky. Most small firms fail within the first year. You have security here, benefits, a stable paycheck. I have those things in my own business too. Along with something I've never had here. Which is? Respect. The word hung in the air between us. Heavy. True. Diane's mouth pressed into a thin line. I've always respected your work. You laughed at me when I asked for a raise. You called me greedy for expecting fair compensation. You gave my projects to Trevor and let him take credit. You've walked past my desk for 4 years without learning a single thing about me beyond what's in my employee file. That's not fair. You're right, I said. It's not fair. But it's true. I stood up. The meeting was over, whether she realized it or not. I'll finish out my 2 weeks. I'll document all my current projects and transition my clients to Sarah and Ramon. I'll make sure nothing falls through the cracks. Because unlike some people, I actually care about doing my job well even when nobody's watching. Diane stood too, flustered, still processing. Camilla, please. Let's take a few days to think about this. Don't make an impulsive decision. I'm not being impulsive. I've been planning this for a year. The only impulsive thing I did was wait this long. I picked up my folder, turned toward the door. Wait. I paused, hand on the door handle. Who else knows about this? Diane asked. Just you. For now. Are you taking any of our clients with you? I turned back to face her. I haven't solicited anyone. But if clients choose to follow me after I leave, that's their decision. Not mine. Not yours. It was the truth. Mostly. I hadn't actively recruited anyone. But 3 of my current private clients had found me after working with me at Summit Ridge and asking if I did independent consulting. I hadn't said no. Diane knew it too. I could see her mentally running through her client list, wondering who might leave. Wondering how much this was going to cost her. 2 weeks, I said. Then I'm gone. I opened the door and walked out of conference room C. Behind me, through the glass walls, I could see Diane still standing at the table, staring at my resignation letter like it was written in a language she couldn't read. And maybe it was. Because the language of self-worth, of boundaries, of walking away from places that don't value you? That was a language Diane Garrett had never bothered to learn. The news spread through Summit Ridge Financial like wildfire in a drought. I didn't tell anyone. Didn't send a department-wide email or make an announcement. I simply walked back to my cubicle after the meeting, sat down, and went back to work like nothing had happened. But Diane told someone. Probably her boss, Richard Halverson, the senior VP who I'd met exactly twice in 4 years. And Richard told someone else. And by lunchtime, the entire 7th floor knew that quiet, reliable Camilla Donovan had just quit. Fiona was the first to approach me. Is it true? She whispered, leaning over the cubicle wall, eyes wide. Did you actually resign? I looked up from my computer screen where I was documenting client notes. Yes. Oh my God. Why? What happened? Did they do something? I got a better opportunity. Where are you going? Hartford Financial? Pinnacle Group? I'm starting my own practice. Fiona's mouth fell open. Actually fell open like a cartoon character. You're what? I've been building a financial planning business on the side. It's doing well. Well enough that I don't need to be here anymore. She blinked at me like I'd just told her I was moving to Antarctica. How long have you been planning this? About a year. A year? Her voice went up an octave. You've been planning to leave for a year and you never said anything? I couldn't. Not until it was done. She stared at me for a long moment, then said quietly, I don't know whether to be impressed or hurt that you didn't trust me. That hit differently than I expected. Fiona wasn't a close friend, but she'd been kind to me. We'd shared lunches, complained about annoying clients, celebrated small victories together. It wasn't about trust, I said carefully. It was about protecting something fragile until it was strong enough to survive scrutiny. She nodded slowly, like she understood even if she didn't like it. Well. Good for you, I guess. That takes guts. Or stupidity. Time will tell. She laughed, but it sounded sad. You're going to do great. You're the best analyst in this department and everyone knows it. Everyone except the people who decided my salary, apparently. By 2 p.m., 3 other colleagues had stopped by my desk with variations of the same conversation. Shock. Questions. A strange mix of congratulations and concern, like I'd announced I was climbing Everest without oxygen. Trevor didn't come by. But I saw him watching me from across the office, his expression unreadable. At 3:15, my desk phone rang. Internal extension. I didn't recognize the number. Camilla Donovan. Camilla, this is Richard Halverson. Do you have a moment to come up to my office? My stomach dropped. Richard never called me. Richard barely knew I existed. Of course. I'll be right there. His office was on the 8th floor, the executive level with the good coffee machines and the artwork that wasn't motivational posters. I'd been up here exactly twice. Once for my initial interview 4 years ago. Once for a company-wide meeting in the large conference room. His assistant, a severe-looking woman named Patricia, nodded me toward his door. Go ahead in. Richard Halverson was in his late 50s, silver hair, expensive suit, the kind of man who looked like he'd been born wearing cufflinks. He stood when I entered, which surprised me. Extended his hand for a shake. Camilla. Thank you for coming up. Please, sit. I sat in one of the leather chairs across from his massive desk. The view behind him showed the entire downtown district of Ashmont City, skyscrapers, and construction cranes and the river cutting through everything like a silver ribbon. I'll get straight to the point, Richard said. Diane told me about your resignation. I wanted to speak with you before you made any final decisions. My decision is final. I understand you feel that way now. But I'd like to make you a counteroffer. Here it was. The thing Diane had tried and failed to do. The last-ditch attempt to keep me from leaving. We clearly haven't done right by you, Richard continued. Diane shared your performance metrics with me. 97% client retention. Perfect project completion rate. You've been carrying a significant load for this department, and we've failed to recognize that appropriately. I said nothing. Just waited. I'd like to offer you a promotion. Senior Financial Analyst. 15% salary increase, effective immediately. Additional performance bonus structure. And your choice of the Morrison or Blackwell accounts, our 2 largest clients. 15%. The Morrison account alone was worth $500,000 in annual fees. This was a real offer. The kind of offer that would have changed my life if it had come 2 years ago. 1 year ago. 6 months ago. But now? What about Trevor? I asked. Richard hesitated. What about him? He was promoted to senior analyst 6 months ago. Are you creating a second senior position, or are you demoting him? We're restructuring the department. Trevor would move to a different focus area. Translation, they were demoting him. Or at least reducing his role. Because they'd finally realized he couldn't handle it. And if I accept this, I said slowly, what happens next year when budget season comes around again? Do I get another speech about being conservative with compensation? You'd be on a different track. Senior staff have different review processes. With respect, Mr. Halverson, I don't believe you. He looked genuinely taken aback. People probably didn't say things like that to Richard Halverson. I've been on a track for 4 years, I continued. A track that went nowhere while less qualified people got promoted around me. You're offering me this now because I'm leaving, not because you suddenly realized my value. And that tells me everything I need to know. Camilla, I understand you're frustrated. I'm not frustrated. I'm done. You're making a mistake. The corporate structure provides stability. Resources. A network you can't replicate on your own. I've already replicated it. That's why I'm leaving. Richard leaned back in his chair, studying me with an expression I couldn't quite read. How many clients do you have in this business of yours? 53. Revenue? I hesitated, then decided honesty couldn't hurt at this point. Approximately 18,000 per month. Growing. His eyebrows rose. That's more than I expected. It's what happens when you charge what you're worth instead of accepting what someone else decides to pay you. A long silence. Outside the window, a plane drew a white line across the blue sky, heading somewhere far away from here. You know, Richard said finally, in my 30 years in this industry, I've seen hundreds of people leave to start their own practices. Most of them fail. Not because they're not talented, but because they underestimate how hard it is to run a business. Client acquisition. Compliance. Taxes. Insurance. Marketing. It's not just doing the work, it's doing everything else too. I know. Do you? Because you're young, Camilla. You've got 4 years of experience. You're competing against firms with decades of history, established reputations, massive marketing budgets. And yet I have 53 clients who chose me anyway. Another silence. What do you want me to say? Richard asked, and for the first time, he sounded almost human. Almost curious instead of corporate. What would it take to keep you here? I thought about that question. Really thought about it. Nothing, I said finally. Because the problem isn't the salary or the title or the office. The problem is that I had to quit before anyone here saw me as valuable. And I can't unsee that. Richard nodded slowly. Fair enough. He stood, which meant the meeting was over. I stood too. For what it's worth, he said, I think you're going to do well. You've got something a lot of people don't. What's that? Clarity. Most people who leave don't know what they're running toward. They just know what they're running from. But you? You built something before you left. That's rare. It was the closest thing to a compliment anyone at Summit Ridge had given me in 4 years. Thank you, I said. I left his office, took the elevator back down to 7, and returned to my cubicle. Fiona looked up when I passed her desk. What did Halverson want? Counteroffer. Did you take it? No. She smiled. Good. The rest of the week was surreal. I kept showing up, kept doing my work, kept acting like everything was normal. But it wasn't normal. Everyone knew I was leaving. Everyone had opinions about it. Some people were supportive. Sarah from accounting stopped by to congratulate me and ask for my business card for her sister who needed financial planning help. Ramon asked detailed questions about how I'd structured my business, said he'd been thinking about doing something similar someday. Others were skeptical. Marcus from the investment team told me I was crazy to give up a stable job in an uncertain economy. Linda from HR gave me a long lecture about the importance of employer-provided health insurance, like I hadn't already researched private insurance options and factored them into my budget. And then there was Trevor. He avoided me for 3 days. Didn't make eye contact in meetings. Didn't respond to emails unless absolutely necessary. I knew Diane had told him about the restructuring. Knew he understood what my resignation meant for him. On Thursday afternoon, he finally approached my desk. Can we talk? He asked, voice low. Sure. He glanced around the office, then nodded toward one of the small conference rooms. Privately? We went to conference room B, the one without glass walls. He closed the door and turned to face me. Is this because of me? He asked. I hadn't expected that question. What? Your resignation. Is it because I got promoted and you didn't? I studied him carefully. He looked genuinely concerned. Maybe even guilty. No, Trevor. This isn't about you. Then why? It's about me. About what I'm worth and what I'm willing to accept. You getting promoted was just one example of a much bigger pattern. They're demoting me, he said quietly. Diane told me yesterday. Once you leave, they're restructuring my role. Less client contact. More internal projects. I should have felt satisfaction. Vindication. But mostly I just felt tired. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. No, you're not. I am. Not because you don't deserve it. But because this whole system is broken. They promoted you before you were ready, didn't give you proper support, and now they're punishing you for failing at something you weren't equipped to do. That's not your fault. He looked at me for a long moment. You're better at this than I am. Everyone knows it. Then you should have said something when they promoted you instead of me. Would it have mattered? Probably not. But it would have been something. Good luck with your business, Trevor said. He didn't sound bitter. Just defeated. After he left, I sat in that empty conference room for a few minutes, staring at the blank whiteboard on the wall. In 10 days, I'd be gone from this place. From these rooms, these conversations, these patterns of being overlooked and underestimated. In 10 days, I'd walk out of Summit Ridge Financial and into a future I'd built entirely on my own terms. And I couldn't wait. My last day at Summit Ridge Financial was March 28th. A Thursday. The kind of mild spring day where the sun feels warm but the breeze still carries winter's memory. I'd spent the previous 2 weeks methodically dismantling my presence there. Transferred every active client file to Sarah or Ramon with detailed notes about preferences, concerns, communication styles. Organized 4 years of project documentation into labeled folders. Updated process guides. Tied up every loose end I could find because even though they'd never valued me properly, I still had professional pride. But what I didn't expect was what started happening in those final 2 weeks. The messages. The phone calls. The quiet conversations that changed everything. It started on day 3 of my notice period. I was at my desk, updating a client transition document, when my personal cell phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Hi Camilla, this is Janet Pearson. We met last year when you handled my portfolio review at Summit Ridge. I heard you're starting your own practice. I'd love to discuss moving my accounts to work with you directly. Are you taking new clients? Janet Pearson. The Morrison account. One of Summit Ridge's largest clients. The account Richard had offered me as part of his counteroffer. I stared at that text for a full minute. I hadn't reached out to her. Hadn't mentioned I was leaving. Hadn't solicited her business in any way. But somehow she'd found out, and she wanted to follow me. I texted back carefully, Hi Janet. I am opening my practice to new clients in April. I'd be happy to schedule a consultation to discuss your needs. Let me know what works for your calendar. Her response came immediately, How about next Tuesday? I'd like to get this settled before you're fully booked. Tuesday. For days after my last day at Summit Ridge. Tuesday works perfectly. I'll send you my scheduling link. I sat there, heart pounding, trying to process what had just happened. The Morrison account was worth at least $200,000 in annual fees to Summit Ridge. If Janet moved her full portfolio to me, that was $200,000 they'd lose. Because of me. 2 days later, another message. This time an email to my business address. Camilla, this is Derek Chen from Brightwell Investments. We worked together on the Carson merger last year. I'm moving to a new company and need to restructure my retirement accounts. Your name came up in a conversation with Janet Pearson. Do you have availability to meet? Derek Chen. Another Summit Ridge client, though a smaller account. But still. Then another. And another. By the end of week 1 of my notice period, I'd had contact from 7 Summit Ridge clients expressing interest in working with me independently. 7. I hadn't solicited any of them. Hadn't sent emails or made calls or done anything that could be considered poaching. They found me. Because apparently, word travels fast in professional circles when someone good starts their own practice. I was careful. Extremely careful. Every conversation, I documented. Every message, I saved. I never badmouthed Summit Ridge. Never promised I could offer better service. Just confirmed that yes, I was opening my own practice, and yes, I'd be happy to discuss their financial planning needs. Because legally, I was in the clear. My employment contract had a non-compete clause, but it was poorly written and only covered directly soliciting clients within 6 months of leaving. It said nothing about clients who contacted me independently. My attorney had confirmed this 3 times. Still, I knew this wouldn't go unnoticed. On day 8 of my notice period, Diane called me into her office. Not a conference room this time. Her actual office with the door that could close and the walls that weren't glass. "Sit down, Camilla." I sat. Her expression was harder than I'd ever seen it. "I've received some concerning information," Diane said, her voice cold and measured. "Several of our clients have mentioned they're considering moving their accounts to your new practice. Some clients have reached out to me, yes." "How many?" "I'm not sure that's relevant." "How many?" I met her eyes. 7 have expressed interest. 3 have scheduled consultations. Diane's jaw clenched. "You're poaching our clients." "I'm not poaching anyone. They contacted me independently. I haven't solicited anyone, haven't sent marketing materials, haven't done anything that violates my employment agreement." "You told them you were leaving." "No. I didn't. They found out through other channels and reached out to me." "That's not the same thing. This is exactly the kind of thing our non-compete clause is designed to prevent. Your non-compete clause prohibits direct solicitation. It doesn't prohibit clients from choosing to work with me of their own accord. I've had an attorney review my contract thoroughly." Diane's face flushed red. "You planned this. This whole thing. You've been strategically positioning yourself to steal our client base." "I positioned myself to build a good reputation. Clients remember who actually did the work on their accounts, Diane. They remember who returned their calls and answered their questions and made them feel heard. That's not theft. That's consequences. We could sue you. You could try. But your non-compete is vague and probably unenforceable, and you know it. Plus, suing me would require admitting in court that your clients prefer working with me over your firm. I don't think that's the publicity Summit Ridge wants." We stared at each other across her desk. A battle of wills I never would have had the courage to fight a year ago. "You know what really bothers me about this?" Diane said finally, her voice low and bitter. "I gave you a chance here. I hired you when you were fresh out of college with barely any experience. I trained you. I gave you opportunities. You gave me work. Not opportunities. There's a difference. I don't know what you think you're proving with this little revenge stunt." "This isn't revenge," I said, and my voice was steady. Calm. "Revenge would be if I was trying to hurt you. I'm not. I'm just living my life and doing my job well, and if your clients prefer that over what Summit Ridge offers, that's a business problem, not a personal attack. Those clients wouldn't even know you exist without this firm. And I wouldn't have left this firm if you'd valued me while I was here. So I guess we're both dealing with the consequences of our choices." Diane opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time since I'd known her, she had nothing to say. "I have 6 days left," I said. "I'm going to finish my transitions professionally. I'm going to document everything. And then I'm going to leave. What clients choose to do after that is between them and their own best interests." I stood up. The meeting was clearly over. "Camilla," Diane said as I reached the door. Her voice had changed. Less angry, more something else. Something almost like fear. "How many do you think will leave?" I turned back. "I honestly don't know. But if I had to guess, everyone who ever worked directly with me and saw the difference between someone who cares about their financial future and someone who just wants to hit quarterly targets." Her face went pale. I left her office and went back to my desk, hands shaking with adrenaline. The truth was, I didn't know how many clients would follow me. Maybe 7. Maybe none. Maybe all of them would decide that the safety of a big established firm was worth more than the personal attention I could offer. But 3 days later, I got my answer. Janet Pearson officially submitted her paperwork to move her entire portfolio to Donovan Financial Strategies. $2 million in assets under management. She sent me a message with the confirmation. I've been in finance for 30 years. I know talent when I see it. Looking forward to working with you, Camilla. Derek Chen followed the next day. Then Amanda Curry, a client I'd worked with on estate planning. Then Robert and Lisa Hartwell, the couple whose retirement accounts I'd restructured. By my last day at Summit Ridge, 11 clients had formally committed to moving their accounts to my practice. 11 out of the roughly 40 I'd worked with directly during my 4 years there. That represented approximately $1.3 million in annual revenue leaving Summit Ridge. Because of me. I should have felt guilty. Should have felt bad about the damage I was doing to the company that had employed me, underpaid me, but still employed me nonetheless. But I didn't. Because these weren't their clients. These were people. Human beings with financial goals and fears and families to protect. And they'd chosen to trust me with that responsibility because I'd earned it. My last day arrived with surprising little fanfare. No goodbye party. No cake in the break room. Diane didn't come by to wish me well. Richard didn't send a farewell email. Just Fiona, Sarah, and Ramon, who took me to lunch at the Thai place across the street. You're really doing it, Fiona said, raising her water glass. You're actually leaving. I'm actually leaving. Are you scared? Sarah asked. Terrified, I admitted. But also excited. Mostly excited. How many clients do you have now? Ramon wanted to know. 64 active clients. 11 more transferring from Summit Ridge over the next month. Ramon whistled low. That's incredible. In 1 year? 14 months. But yes. What's your revenue projection for the first full year? Sarah asked. She was always about the numbers. Conservative estimate? 280,000 gross. Optimistic estimate? 350,000. Fiona nearly choked on her pad thai. Are you serious? After expenses, it'll be less. But yes. That's more than double what you were making here, Ramon said quietly. Triple, actually. They never gave me a raise, remember? We ate in silence for a moment. You know what the crazy part is? Fiona said finally. Everyone in that office knows you deserved better. Everyone knows you did the best work. But nobody said anything. Including me. And I'm sorry for that. It's not your fault. It kind of is though. We all just accepted it. Let them treat you like you were replaceable when you were the one holding things together. She looked down at her plate. I think about that sometimes. How many times I watched them overlook you and said nothing. You're saying something now, I pointed out. Too late to matter. It matters to me. After lunch, we walked back to Summit Ridge one last time. I cleaned out my desk. 4 years of work life fit into 2 cardboard boxes. Photos, a coffee mug, some files I'd printed, a succulent plant that had somehow survived despite my neglect. At 4:47 p.m., I sent my final email. A simple thank you message to the department, professional and brief, wishing everyone well. At 4:52 p.m., I logged out of my computer for the last time. At 4:58 p.m., I walked to the elevator carrying my 2 boxes. And at 5 p.m. exactly, I walked out of Summit Ridge Financial's glass doors into the spring afternoon, unemployed for the first time in 4 years. Also completely free for the first time in 4 years. I put the boxes in my trunk, sat in the driver's seat, and pulled out my phone. 17 unread messages. 6 were from prospective clients who'd gotten my information from referrals. 3 were from existing clients confirming appointments. 2 were from my professional network congratulating me on the leap. And 1 was from a number I didn't recognize. Hi Camilla, my name is Patricia Wu. I'm the Business Development Director at Clearwater Investment Group. We're always looking for talented independent advisors to collaborate with on larger accounts. Would love to buy you coffee and discuss potential partnership opportunities. Let me know if you're interested. Partnership opportunities. With Clearwater, one of the most respected investment firms in the state. I started my car, pulled out of the Summit Ridge parking lot for the last time, and smiled. The future was terrifying and uncertain and completely unwritten. And it was mine. 3 months after leaving Summit Ridge, I received an envelope in the mail. Not an email. An actual physical envelope with a Summit Ridge financial return address and my name handwritten across the front in script I didn't recognize. I stood in the doorway of my new office, not my apartment anymore, an actual office space I'd leased in the Riverside Commons building, and stared at that envelope like it might explode. I'd been living in a different world for 12 weeks. A world where I controlled my schedule, chose my clients, and built something that grew because of my effort, not despite the obstacles other people put in my way. The idea of Summit Ridge reaching back into this new life felt intrusive. Wrong. But curiosity won. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded once. The letterhead read, Richard Halverson, Senior Vice President. Dear Camilla, I hope this letter finds you well and that your new practice is thriving. I imagine it is, given the number of former Summit Ridge clients who have chosen to work with you. I'm writing to you not in any official capacity, but as someone who has been in this industry long enough to recognize when he's made a mistake. We made a mistake with you. I made a mistake with you. You were right when you said that offering you a promotion only after you resigned told you everything you needed to know. It did. It told you that we didn't see your value until it was walking out the door, and by then it was too late. I've spent the past few months watching the ripple effects of your departure. 11 clients have left, representing significant revenue loss. More importantly, we've lost institutional knowledge that's proving difficult to replace. The 2 analysts we hired to fill your role are competent, but they're not you. They don't have your client relationships, your attention to detail, or your ability to make complex financial concepts accessible. Trevor Langston submitted his resignation last week. He's leaving the industry entirely, going back to school for something unrelated. In his exit interview, he said he'd been promoted into a role he wasn't ready for and set up to fail. He was right. I'm not writing to ask you to come back. I know that ship has sailed, and honestly, I respect you too much to insult your intelligence with another offer you don't need. I'm writing to acknowledge that you were right. About the culture here. About how we undervalue people until they prove we should have valued them all along. About the difference between managing employees and actually seeing the human beings doing the work. I'm also writing to apologize. You deserved better than what we gave you, and I'm sorry we failed to provide it. I hope your practice continues to grow. Based on what I've heard through professional channels, you're building something impressive. I'm not surprised. Respectfully, Richard Halverson. I read the letter 3 times. Sat down at my desk, in my office, with my name on the door, and read it a 4th time. An apology. A real one. Not a corporate non-apology designed to avoid liability. Actual acknowledgement of actual harm. I didn't cry. But something in my chest loosened slightly. Some knot I'd been carrying without realizing it. Because here's the thing about being undervalued for years, part of you always wonders if maybe they were right. Maybe you weren't good enough. Maybe you were overestimating your abilities. Maybe the problem was you, not them. And even though I'd built proof, 64 clients turning into 89, revenue exceeding my projections, referrals pouring in faster than I could handle, some small part of me still carried that doubt. Richard's letter didn't erase it. But it helped. I filed the letter in a folder labeled Professional Correspondence and moved on with my day. Because I had a consultation in 20 minutes with a potential client, and dwelling on the past wasn't going to build my future. The consultation went well. A woman named Grace Pemberton, mid-40s, recently divorced and trying to understand the financial settlement her lawyer had negotiated. She chose to work with me on the spot. Signed the contract right there in my office, her hands shaking slightly as she wrote her name. "Thank you," she said when we finished. "Thank you for not making me feel stupid for not understanding this stuff." "You're not stupid. The system is deliberately complicated to make people feel like they need experts. My job is to translate it into language that makes sense." She smiled, relieved. "That's exactly what I need." After Grace left, I updated my client management system, scheduled our first full planning session, and then did something I'd started doing recently. I pulled out a journal I'd bought specifically for this purpose. On the first page, I'd written a question: what would you tell yourself 1 year ago? I'd been adding to it periodically. Little notes to my past self. Things I'd learned. Encouragements I'd needed back then. Today I added, Richard apologized. It doesn't change what happened, but it matters that someone finally acknowledged it. Also, you signed your 89th client today. You were right to bet on yourself. That evening, I had dinner with Jolene Chin, the independent advisor from Crescent Bay who'd become something like a mentor over the past months. We met at a small Italian restaurant halfway between our offices. "You're glowing," she said when I sat down. "Either business is going incredibly well or you're in love. Which is it?" "Business. Definitely business. Hit 90 clients this week." Jolene whistled. 90 in 14 months? "Camilla, that's extraordinary. Most practices take 3 years to build half that." I had a head start. And apparently Summit Ridge was sitting on a client base that was ready to leave if given any viable alternative. Still. You should be proud. I was. But I also felt something else. Something I hadn't expected. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Of course. Does it ever feel hollow? The success, I mean. Like you're proving something to people who aren't even watching anymore?" Jolene set down her wine glass and looked at me thoughtfully. "You're asking if revenge loses its satisfaction when the people you wanted to prove wrong aren't paying attention?" "Kind of, yes. Here's what I've learned," she said. "Building something out of spite works for a while. It gets you started, gets you through the hard parts. But eventually, you have to find a different reason to keep going. Otherwise you're still letting them control your narrative." "What's your reason?" "Honestly, I love the work. I love helping people feel confident about their financial futures. I love the flexibility to take Fridays off when my daughter has a school event. I love knowing that my income is directly tied to my effort, not someone else's evaluation of my worth." She paused. The revenge part was just the spark. The actual fire is something else entirely. I thought about that. About why I kept working 70-hour weeks even though I could probably scale back now. About why every new client felt like proof of something instead of just business as usual. "I got a letter from my old boss today," I said. "He apologized. Said they'd made a mistake with me." "How did that feel?" "Good. Validating. But also, irrelevant. Like it doesn't actually change anything about my life now." "That's growth," Jolene said. "That's the moment you realize you've stopped building something away from them and started building something for yourself." We ate in comfortable silence for a while. "I'm thinking about hiring someone," I said eventually. "An assistant to handle scheduling and client communications. Maybe eventually a junior advisor to handle smaller accounts. I'm at capacity and turning away potential clients. That's a big step. Terrifying step. What if I can't afford it? What if I hire wrong? What if the business plateaus and I'm stuck with overhead I can't support? What if it grows and you're stuck doing everything yourself until you burn out?" Jolene countered. "Camilla, you're making the same mistake I made in year 2. You're so afraid of failure that you're limiting your own success." She was right. I knew she was right. I'll post the job listing this week, I said. Good. And Camilla? Stop checking to see if Summit Ridge is watching. They're not, and even if they were, it wouldn't matter. You're not building this for them. You're building it for you. I went home that night to my apartment, still the same one-bedroom with the leaky faucet I kept meaning to fix, and opened my laptop. I drafted a job posting for an administrative assistant. 15 to 20 hours per week to start, with potential for full-time as the business grew. Then I did something else. I opened my email and composed a message to Richard Halverson. Richard. Thank you for your letter. I appreciate the apology and the acknowledgement. It means more than you might realize. I hope Summit Ridge finds what it needs to build a better culture. Not for my sake, I've moved on. But for the sake of the next person who works as hard as I did and deserves to be seen for it. I'm doing well. The practice is growing beyond my initial projections, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to do work I love with clients who value it. I wish you the best. Camilla Donovan. Founder, Donovan Financial Strategies. I sent it before I could second-guess myself. 2 days later, I got a response. Just 2 sentences. Thank you for the grace in your response. You're going to do extraordinary things. I'm glad I'll get to watch from a distance. I filed that email next to his letter and didn't think about it again. Because Jolene was right. I wasn't building this for Summit Ridge anymore. Wasn't building it to prove Diane wrong or to make Trevor regret his promotion or to show Richard what he'd lost. I was building it because I was good at this work. Because helping Grace Pemberton understand her divorce settlement mattered. Because Janet Pearson trusted me with her retirement. Because 89 people, soon to be 90, then 100, then more, had chosen to bet on me the same way I'd bet on myself. That week, I hired an assistant named Kira Chen, a recent college graduate with exceptional organizational skills and a genuine interest in finance. I leased a second office in my suite for future expansion. I raised my rates by 20% because a pricing consultant told me I was undercharging for my expertise. And I stopped checking Summit Ridge's website to see if they'd replaced me. Stopped wondering what Diane thought about my success. Stopped measuring my growth against their loss. Because growth isn't about them anymore. It's about the woman who walked into a performance review expecting a raise and walked out planning an empire. It's about the decision to stop asking for permission and start building something nobody could take away. It's about proving to yourself that you were right all along. The revenge was never making them regret losing me. The revenge was building a life so full that I forgot to care whether they regretted it or not. 18 months after I walked out of Summit Ridge Financial, I stood in front of 200 people at the Regional Independent Advisors Conference in Ashmont City and told my story. Not all of it. Not the painful parts about crying in my car or the sleepless nights wondering if I'd made a catastrophic mistake. Just the parts about taking the leap, building systems, growing a practice from nothing into something sustainable. When I finished, the applause was polite but genuine. Afterward, during the networking break, 17 people approached me with business cards and questions. But one conversation changed everything. A young woman, maybe 25, with nervous eyes and a death grip on her conference program, waited until everyone else had left before approaching me. Ms. Donovan? I'm Taylor Ashford. I work at Summit Ridge Financial. My stomach dropped. Oh. I'm a junior analyst. Started about 8 months ago. She glanced around like she was worried someone might overhear. I heard about you from some of the senior staff. About how you left. About what you built. Okay. I'm in the same position you were in. Doing good work, getting passed over, watching less qualified people get promoted while I'm told to be patient. Her voice cracked slightly. My annual review is next month. I already know they're not giving me a raise. And I don't know what to do. I looked at this young woman, at her nervous hands and hopeful eyes, and saw myself 2 years ago. Scared. Uncertain. Waiting for someone to tell her she was worth more than they were willing to pay. Can I buy you coffee? I asked. We went to the hotel cafe. She ordered a latte she barely touched. I ordered tea I didn't drink. Tell me about your situation, I said. Taylor did. The story was eerily familiar. She'd been at Summit Ridge for 2 years. Excellent performance reviews. Client retention above department average. But when promotion time came, they'd given it to someone else. Someone with connections. Someone whose father played golf with Richard Halverson. They told me I need more experience, Taylor said bitterly. But Marcus, the guy they promoted, has less experience than I do. He just has the right last name. Marcus. Different Marcus than the one in my earlier story outline, but the pattern was identical. It was always a Marcus or a Trevor or a Chad. Always someone who didn't have to prove themselves because they'd been pre-approved by a system designed to recognize them. So what do I do? Taylor asked. Did you just quit? Did you have a plan? I had a year-long plan, I said. I built my business on nights and weekends while still working full-time. By the time I quit, I already had enough clients and revenue to replace my salary. I don't have that. I don't have clients or a business or anything. I just have this job I hate and student loans I can't afford to default on. Then you start smaller. What are you good at? Financial analysis. Estate planning. I'm really good with complex tax situations. Do you have friends? Family? College connections who might need financial advice? Maybe. I haven't really thought about it. Start there. Offer to help people for free or cheap while you're learning. Build a reputation. Get testimonials. Create a website. Start establishing yourself as someone who knows what they're talking about. Taylor looked overwhelmed. That sounds like a lot of work on top of a full-time job. It is. It's exhausting. You'll be tired all the time. You'll have no social life. You'll wonder if you're crazy for doing it. I paused. But it's worth it. Because the alternative is staying somewhere that doesn't value you and hoping things magically change. They won't. How long did it take you? Before you could quit? 14 months. But I was aggressive about it. You might need longer. Or you might move faster. Everyone's timeline is different. She sat with that for a moment. What if I fail? What if I build this thing and nobody wants to work with me? That's possible. Failure is always possible. But you know what else is possible? Success. Freedom. Building something that's actually yours. Waking up and not dreading your job. Getting paid what you're worth instead of what someone else decides to give you. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's hard as hell. But it's also worth it. Taylor left that conversation with my business card, my email address, and something I recognized in her eyes. Not certainty. But possibility. The beginning of a plan. 6 months later, she sent me an email. I took your advice. I've been doing free financial consultations for friends and family. I have 8 people who've said they'd be willing to pay for ongoing services once I'm officially set up. I registered my business name last week. I'm terrified but also excited. Thank you for showing me this was possible. I replied, you showed yourself it was possible. I just told you what I did. You're doing the work. Keep going. That same week, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. A reporter from Ashmont Business Journal. Ms. Donovan? I'm working on a story about the rise of independent financial advisors in the region. Your name keeps coming up. Would you be willing to be interviewed? The article came out 3 weeks later. The new face of financial planning, how independent advisors are disrupting traditional firms. My photo was on the cover. The article detailed my growth from 0 to 132 clients in 20 months, my revenue model, my client satisfaction ratings. It also included this quote, traditional firms prioritize shareholder value over client relationships. Independent advisors can prioritize the human being in front of them because our success depends on their success, not on quarterly earnings reports. The day the article published, my phone didn't stop ringing. Potential clients. Other advisors asking for advice. Media requests for follow-up interviews. And one call from a blocked number that I almost didn't answer. Camilla? It's Diane Garrett. I actually pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it to make sure I'd heard correctly. Diane. I saw the article. Congratulations. That's impressive growth. Thank you. Silence. Awkward and heavy. I'm calling because I wanted to tell you something, Diane said finally. Summit Ridge is closing the Ashmont office. We're consolidating operations to the main headquarters in Hartford. Most of the local staff is being let go. I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No schadenfreude. Just distance. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and meant it. People would lose jobs. People like Fiona and Sarah and Ramon who'd been kind to me. The client losses after you left were significant. We never recovered. And then the market shifted, and... She trailed off. Anyway. I wanted you to know. And I wanted to say that you were right. About everything. About how we treated you. About what matters in this business. About all of it. I appreciate you saying that. For what it's worth, I wish I'd listened. I wish I'd fought harder to keep you. Would you have? A long pause. Probably not. I was too worried about protecting my own position to advocate for someone else's worth. That's on me. We said goodbye. I hung up and sat with that conversation for a long time. Summit Ridge closing. The place that had consumed 4 years of my life, that had made me question my worth, that had ultimately pushed me into building something better, gone. I thought I'd feel victorious. Vindicated. But mostly I just felt tired. And grateful I'd gotten out when I did. That evening, I had dinner with my family. My sister, who I'd barely spoken to during those exhausting months of building the business. My mother, who'd been terrified when I quit and was now my loudest cheerleader. How's the empire? My sister asked, teasing. Growing. Chaotic. Good. How many clients now? 135 as of this morning. I have a waiting list. My mother shook her head in amazement. I still can't believe you did this. Built a whole business from nothing. Not from nothing. From anger, initially. But then from something better. What's better than anger? My sister asked. Purpose. Proof. The realization that I'm good at this and people value it and I don't need anyone's permission to do it. Later, driving home through Ashmont's quiet streets, I thought about Taylor Ashford. About the 17 people at the conference who'd asked for my advice. About the dozens of messages I'd received from young professionals, especially women, who'd read the article and reached out. I'd started this journey trying to prove Summit Ridge wrong. Trying to show Diane and Trevor and Richard that they'd made a mistake. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about them. It became about Grace Pemberton understanding her divorce settlement. About Janet Pearson trusting me with her retirement. About Taylor Ashford seeing a path forward when she'd felt trapped. It became about the assistant I'd hired, Kira, who told me this was her dream job because I actually listened to her ideas. About the junior advisor I'd just brought on, Marcus Rivera, who'd left a big firm because he wanted to work somewhere that valued him. It became about building something that mattered. Not because it proved anyone wrong, but because it helped people. The revenge had evolved into something bigger than revenge. It had become legacy. Not the kind of legacy that gets your name on a building or wins you awards, though some of that came too. The real legacy. The kind where someone says, Camilla Donovan showed me it was possible, and then goes out and does it themselves. 2 years after walking out of Summit Ridge Financial, I stood in my expanded office suite, now 4 rooms, 3 employees, 135 clients and growing, and looked at the wall I'd dedicated to motivation. There were client thank you cards. The business journal article. My business license. A photo of me at the advisors conference. And right in the center, a framed piece of paper. My one-page achievement summary from that final performance review at Summit Ridge. The one Diane had barely glanced at. The one that had documented everything I'd accomplished that they'd refused to recognize. I'd hung it there not as a reminder of what they'd lost, but as a reminder of what I'd known all along. I was worth more than they were willing to pay. And the moment I believed that myself, really believed it, not just hoped it, everything changed. My name is Camilla Rose Donovan. I'm 34 years old. I built a financial planning practice from nothing but anger and audacity and late nights and the radical belief that I deserved better. They told me I was lucky to have a job. I built a business that proved I was unlucky to have settled for them. And the best part? The absolute best part? I don't think about them anymore. Not when I'm helping clients. Not when I'm hiring. Not when I'm planning my next 5 years. I think about the work. The people. The purpose. Because revenge, real revenge, isn't about making them regret losing you. It's about building a life so fulfilling that you forget to care whether they regret it at all. And I forgot years ago. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.